behind. I have purchased that book and I have read about RTI and how it will benefit our children, but really just trying to get the children back up. Also, what those quarantines and this COVID has done for our children's mental health, coming from someone in the mental health field. We need to get these kids help with what they've been through with COVID.
Thank you, Katie. Pam?
Can you repeat that?
I can. With COVID-19, the pandemic, much has occurred, much changed within the last few years. Technology, delivery of instruction, and the school environment. School districts must adapt faster than ever. What is your main goal for your first year on the school board?
Continuing year on the school board would be so many changes coming down. My esteemed colleague is right that some of the kids got left behind. However, COVID also, it did devastation on a lot of things, but it also helped some things. It made our tech go faster for one-to-one for the technology. So all the kids have devices now, and we're a little ahead of the game there. We started out a little ahead. But there's so much we have to do now. Our technology person is getting us ready to make some changes in technology for the school district. Because of retirement in a couple of years, our business officer, our business manager is just leaving, our curriculum director is retiring also this year. So there's a lot of areas that we have to shepherd and guide along. And COVID has had a devastating effect on some of that. But the teachers and the principals are really addressing that, and we're coming along. We're taking some of those ESSER funds and we're building in those areas we need to build. Not that we're perfect and not that there isn't more to build. Thank you.
James?
Yeah, some of my first goals obviously is going to be sitting down, getting a very clear picture of what the budget looks like, understanding what our district is up against, a little bit more clear once sitting in that seat on the school board. With that, breaking off, continue to focus on safety for our students, and then also looking at mitigation strategies when we're talking about, she was talking about masking and different things. We're faced a pandemic, which none of us have, in my lifetime, know anybody's faced that before. But we're going to have other types of illnesses that emerging infectious diseases. We need to figure out how we're going to handle those mitigation strategies and make sure that those plans are clear to our community and to our students and staff. H1N1 wasn't that far long ago, but that's not comparable to what just recently happened. The other part of it is I want to focus on counselors in the classroom. Right now, the ratio of our counselors in the middle school with what she was talking about with their recovery phase is very little. You don't even have one counselor per 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. That's all you have. And you have students that are going to these counselors every day for support, things that they're trying to work through. And it's not all there, and it needs to be, because that's how you get to recovery when you go through a disaster or emergency or pandemic, which we're facing now. Lastly, our focus on our infrastructure for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Pam Gupta, you have the first response to this question. The current climate is seeing teachers switching districts frequently or leaving education altogether. Often we are unable to fill openings at the start of the school year. What would you do to retain good teachers?
To retain good teachers, one is a culture. We have to create a culture of family, a culture of support with each other, because money isn't everything. If you have two places equal, the culture has to be very good to keep that person. The other thing is we do have to look at salaries and benefits, and we do have to be able to provide competitive salaries and benefits to keep not only the teachers and principals, but all staff, because all staff are educators on some level. So we need to make this a place where people want to come by the culture and by the pay and benefits.
James?
Basically, I look at this as you're looking at recruitment and retention. So trying to have, why does somebody want to come to our school district or work here? And then how are we going to retain them? And it's all different things. It could be funding, how much we're paying them, but also the environment that they're working in, and then who are they working for? And then knowing that they got the support that they need in the classroom. And those are going to be some key elements that you have to take a look at. But the first part is your staff. If you want to retain your staff, they need to feel involved in the process of the things that we make changes on. The other part of that is having the staff involvement. Is any time that we are doing something that may be complex, like we were talking about masks and all that stuff, making sure that they have some involvement, some say in what's going on. But overall, basically with our staff, if you're going to retain them, you need to talk to them. You need to find out what it is that's going on with them in their classroom and school setting, and basically get some feedback. How are we going to keep these people? Also, after you hire someone, getting some feedback. What was that process like on the onboarding? Was it easy? Was it hard? Did we make it more challenging than it needs to be? And then really taking a look at the pay. Pay is an important item, but we need to do analysis to see where we compare with the other schools, and then continue to do that, not just the once every 5 years.
Thank you, James. Katie?
My mom, like I mentioned before, was one of the best teachers I've ever known. She retired. My oldest son's second grade teacher is a close friend of mine, and she retired, and they both did it because they felt like they could no longer teach. There was so many other things that they were doing, they felt like babysitters. Jade said that we need to be able to talk to teachers. Teachers need to be able to have a say. And that's something that I've had so many teachers message me saying that they don't feel like they can say what they want to say without feeling like they're going to lose their jobs. That has to change. They need to be able to give their input on what they think, not necessarily to the students, but to the board, to their supervisors. And really just, I've gotten a lot of insight into why teachers are struggling. I've looked at surveys, I've looked at different aspects of why teachers are leaving, and it really boils down to there's this disconnect between parents and teachers, and how do we mitigate that with the busyness of teaching and the busyness of parenting. And I have ideas about that we can really help with that.
Thank you, Katie. All of the questions you heard were prepared before tonight. These final 3 questions are from the audience. James, you'll have the first response. What can be done to prevent drugs and bullying in the school district to keep our children safe and protected?
Well, bullying is been a constant ongoing topic in all school districts. Basically, you need to develop an environment where students can come forward when something's happening. The other part of that is you need to have follow-through when there are issues within the school district. And so it's always good to revisit policies and procedures for how we handle that. I think the biggest thing is ensuring that there's follow-through when a complaint of that type of bullying is occurring within our district. What was the other part of the question, just to make sure?
preventing drugs.
Preventing drugs, that is a very complex issue. Seeing that in even the EMS field, it's all around us. It's awareness, teaching our kids to talk to us about it, but most importantly, working with our parents from a school district standpoint and talking to our students, explaining the hazards, what can happen. And it seems like it's just that simple, but it's not. You got to continuously do that. We need to have awareness. The DARE programs that are out there, our law enforcement, work with them, our community partners, EMS, get role models within our school district, talking to our kids, and provide examples of why you don't want to do drugs, but most importantly, what the effects can be on your community, but also on yourself, and provide good role models for these students to help them out.
Thank you, James. Katie?
This is another question that I've gotten a lot in my messages, and I've gotten a lot from parents. I have had so many parents come to me and say that their kids have been bullied right here in the Tomah Area School District, and it breaks my heart. And it's definitely something that needs to be addressed, and if I am elected onto the school board, it is something that I will ensure gets on the agenda and is addressed. There needs to be a zero tolerance policy for bullying. James brought up earlier having counselors, and again, being in the mental health field, I'm going to advocate for that. Having counselors that kids feel like they can go to talk to. Bullying is a huge problem in the mental health of our students, and they need people that they can talk to one, prevent bullying, because that's our main goal, right, is to prevent bullying, but then to also have that intervention. We have an amazing school resource officer, Melanie Marshall, I believe is still the school resource officer at Tomah High. She's amazing, and really working with her to figure out some strategies to address the bullying and to address the drugs, but there needs to be a zero tolerance policy. The Tomah Area School District does not tolerate bullying. I've seen the devastating effects, I've seen the suicide rates, and it's not okay.
Thank you. Pam?
This one, I wish I wasn't last because both of these candidates answered very well on this. It's working with counselors with our kids, working with a school officer, having a school officer. I'm very glad that we are continuing that and never question that when the schools around us are backing off of that. Dealing with individual cases when they come up. Dealing from small grades on up on appropriate behaviors. That is in place, and we just need to constantly do that. Awareness, education. We have the policy and procedures in place. We just need to work with the kids on it, work with the kids. Bullying is, they are right, it is awful in our society today. And so is drugs, and just to work with that and educate.
Thank you, Pam. Katie Rice, you have the first response. Are you an advocate for expanding vocational and trades education in the Tomah School District and or public school system?
I am. I very much believe that not all students want to go to college, and that's okay. There are, if you look again at statistics, kids going into trades now are happier because there's not so much push on college. And I think that having those things in the high school and school, I love math, but I have never used calculus before in my life, other than in college. And not to say that we shouldn't be teaching calculus, but there are other things that we could be teaching in high school to help prepare kids for life. Because get thrown out to be an adult, as you know, you weren't taught, you know, all those little things that you need to know to be an adult, finances and all that. So I think with trades and vocations, yeah, that I think will help our kids to, as they prepare for life, those areas where, for those kids that might not want to go to college.
Thank you, Katie. Pam?
Working with vocational trade in our school district is very important. As was said, some of our students want to go into the workforce right away. Some of them want to go into the military. Some of them want to go on to tech or further education. And we should provide the avenues for them to get there. We have the construction academy that we built that is a trades academy towards that. There are agriculture and other avenues, pathways of study for the students to choose for their interest in their future. We work with the tech schools and the colleges for credits in high school for those. We do need to really look at the vocational building part of the high school. It really needs work. It needs updating to bring them into this time period, the machinery and the things in the schools. Also, when I went to high school, it was called home ec ed. Now that part of it needs updating for training for chefs, training for the restaurant industry, those kinds of things. And those areas right now in our school need to be updated for that vocational training.
Thank you, Pam. James?
I would absolutely look at working in vocational and trades as an opportunity for our students and also for our community. It is a huge opportunity for these students to go in and learn about welding, fabrication, carpentry work, how do you change a tire, how do you change your oil on your vehicle. These are skills that in many cases are either lost, but also when we look at the workforce, there's a lot of employers that are looking for these people to come out of high school and to grow from that part. When we talk about economic impact, that's huge to have students that are within our own community to be able to walk out of the school, get a job, and be able to provide for themselves and get off into their career path. I highly look upon that as a very awesome thing for any of these students to ever get a chance. I mean, that's where I started. I started with welding a trade and ended up in fire and emergency services and then emergency preparedness. But you know what? I never forgot that trade. It provided an opportunity that just grew from there. The other part is by doing these trades too, when we look at EMS and fire within our communities, we can send these students to the tech college, get there in their senior year, get college credit, education, and also assist with the local communities with fire and EMS protection as well. So the opportunities are endless, and they do get a decent education place to start. So this is an opportunity.
Thank you. Our 10th and final question, unless we have any more coming from the audience. Number 10, and Pam Gupta, you will begin the response. How important is respect of listening to opposing views? How do you or would you model that?
Having just gone through COVID, I think we modeled that pretty well in listening to all the views. And there were lots of views and lots of opposing views. It doesn't make the job easy, but one has to listen, whatever the concern is, or whatever the issue is, listen to, it's not just two sides, it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 sides. And see, after all the discussion and learning, the board as a whole has to decide what is the best for the students and for the staff working with them.
Thank you, Pam. Sorry I wasn't able to hear the end. James?
Listening is a key component of everything that we do. With my experience experience, I worked, and I still work with part of boards and healthcare emergency readiness coalitions and work across the state with other partners. And that's the first step to really understanding the issues and working through. There's a lot of times that I may say something or working with somebody and we may not align on the view. It's trying to find that common ground because at the end we probably got the same goals, but how do we get there? And I've worked in a lot of different avenues where I watch people where they can't find that common ground or it almost becomes personal. And that listening piece and to really understand what the issue is or what somebody's point is of how they're trying to get to something, I think it's absolutely critical. As far as it goes for myself listening, I'm going to take in that information. There's other board members that have been there a while. They're going to show, they have the history, but you got to listen, and then that provides an opportunity for you to provide feedback once you have a good understanding. But my experience has been with all these boards is the collaboration piece. At some point, you've got to have that, and I think that's critical when we talk about listening and follow through and working with others.
Thank you, James. Katie Rice.
So I think a lot of these questions go back to one main thing that I feel like we've lost in society, and that is communication. I actually did have a few people message me during everything and say that they did not agree with what I was standing for. I had one person in particular message me, and I told this person, I said, why don't we plan to go get something to eat or, go meet up somewhere where we can talk about this in person. Because a lot of times there's a miscommunication that maybe you do agree more than you think you do. But no matter what, I will listen to the opposing side. I may not agree with you, and I may not agree with you at the end, but I will listen. And I am not so headstrong that my husband might disagree with that, but I am not so headstrong that I will not keep an open mind during our conversation. But like I said, I always have an open door. I will listen. I will take into consideration your thoughts and your opinions.
Thank you, Katie. Well, that plea for one more question, we got one. We thank you for it. James, you'll have the first response.
Okay.
When Mike Murray and Remy Gomez had their forum earlier, they talked about return on investment. How would you define the ROI, return on investment, for taxpayers in regards to the education received in the Tomah school system?
Return on investment. When we talk about our students, return on investment is having students that have a successful education and in return can go out into society and be able to work and be able to live a solid life. And I think when I look at the investment, even as myself as a father, I want to ensure that my kids get those opportunities that are ahead of them. And so when I look at it, yeah, it looks at like a cost at first when we're putting money into the school or different things like that. But there's a lot of return when we see these kids blossom and get their careers and their pathways. And for me, that right there is not about the money. That's about our kids being successful and having that pathway to live life and make the most of it and do it in a way that's just positive. And so when we talk about it, I don't think I can put an exact dollar amount to that because there's no money that you can put towards looking at your kids being successful, Mike, along with everybody else's kids. I think that's important.
Thank you, James. Katie?
Yeah, so I agree. There's not really a numerical value that we can put on this. Before my husband and I came in here, so like I mentioned, my husband grew up, he went to school in the Tomah area school district his entire life. And we were out looking at the board out there and all the teachers and the staff, and it was really fun to hear him say, oh, and I went to school with her, and I went to school with him. And Tomah Area School District shaped those students into teachers who are now back here teaching our students, my children. And I think that that is the best return of investment that you're going to see, is to have these students have a great education, have a great experience, and go out and do something and make good decisions and become something and contribute to society. That's the return on investment that I see for our students here in the Tomah Area School District.
Thank you, Katie. Pam?
Our return on our investment is much of what they've said. It's the future of the students for success, but it's also the future of our community and our country, if you want to take it further, state, country. It's the success and the future of that. The education of our students is the basis for all of that. In the past, I've sat both on the board and on the city council, and on one end, I could say education is very important. It keeps the kids. If we spend the money on education, later on we'll have to spend less money on prisons and jails and that kind of thing, because we've done a good job in educating people in very good futures versus somewhere we lost them and they became a problem for society. So there's the tangible, they're out, they're working, they're making money, they're contributing to the community. And then there's the intangible where they're not, and the cost of all the things that go into that.
Thank you. The questioning is over. Time for the closing comments and remarks. And we'll begin after the drawing and vote started. Katie, you'll have the first, and then James second. So Katie, you've got 2 minutes.
So thank you so much for having us here to share more about why we are running for the Tomah Area School District. There were some great questions, and it all boils down to a few goals that I have. Making sure that all students have excellent educational opportunities, whether that's the trade, vocational. James mentioned having students be able to work with colleges, work with fire EMS. My husband's a firefighter. I know that they do a lot of work with the community and different interests that our students have. That's the educational opportunities for all students. Another thing I'd like to see is an improvement in the relationships between the staff, administrations, families, the board, and the community, and then create that atmosphere that attracts and retains excellent teachers to provide for that excellent education. And then promoting common sense, critical thinking among the members of our school board to ensure that all votes are made with a question in mind of how will this benefit our children's education and well-being, making sure that we really look at what the budget looks like, what the curriculum looks like, and doing what I like to call a risk-benefit analysis. It's basically a pros and cons list with data and research, and using that to make decisions for our children, not just that this person said this, so it must be good. Really looking into that data and that research. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. From day one, if given the opportunity and voted into the school board position, I'm going to look at the priorities of what our school district has, and then look at our budget Go from there, looking at does the budget support the priorities, and then reevaluate that, working with our staff, our school board, and others that are involved in that process. Also with that, we're talking about the financial piece. Continuously keep in mind our taxpayers. Our taxpayers have an invested interest in what we're doing as well. As I mentioned earlier, talking about people living day to day on their incomes or fixed incomes within our community, but also trying to strive to find ways that we can continue to expand our education and